Okay, so get ready for a deep dive into a topic that kind of sends shivers down your spine, Area 51. But we're going deeper, like way deeper than usual today,
Uh-huh.
past the rumors and the blurry pictures and all that,
Right.
to a place called S4.
Okay.
And our guide for this is, well, it's a physicist named Bob Lazar
Right.
who claims he worked there, reverse engineering alien tech.
Yeah, it's a story that's captivated people for decades, and for good reason, right? It's this really interesting intersection of hard science and, well, the truly unknown.
Exactly.
And-
So no matter where you stand on the, are we alone debate, Lazar's story, it makes you think. And the thing is, he starts his career at Los Alamos National Laboratory,
Right.
which, for anyone who doesn't know, that's where they developed the atomic bomb. So we're not talking about just some random guy with a telescope.
No, not at all. This is someone steeped in the world of, like cutting edge physics, already dealing with government secrets and all that. But then, yeah, his path takes this unexpected turn
Yeah.
when he moves to Vegas and gets this job offer
Yeah.
that is totally shrouded in secrecy.
It's so weird. And the job description is so vague. It's
Yeah.
just like something about advanced propulsion system
Yeah.
way out in some remote area. I mean, who wouldn't be curious?
Totally. And to add to all that, they put him on this strange schedule, like working for weeks and then getting weeks off. It's almost as if they're trying to keep him isolated,
Yeah.
both physically and from, like, the outside world.
Yeah, it's like, okay, red flags everywhere.
Yeah.
But the scientist in him can't resist. So he finds himself on this bus heading out to this top secret location that he later called S4,
Right.
just south of Area 51.
Yeah, and as you might imagine, security at S4, it was intense.
Oh, I bet.
Armed guards, unusual protocols, this whole atmosphere of, let's just say, heightened awareness.
Oh, yeah.
It was very clear to Lazar that this was not your average research facility.
No kidding. So let's talk about the work.
Okay.
Lazar said he was working on something called gravity amplifiers, which, let's be honest, sounds like it's straight out of science fiction.
It does.
So help us wrap our heads around this. Like, what are gravity amplifiers, at least in the context of Lazar's story?
Okay, so think of them as devices that could theoretically manipulate gravity, potentially even like harnessing it for propulsion.
Oh.
It's a concept that's, baffled physicists for centuries. But Lazar described these amplifiers as key to understanding how these alleged alien craft were able to move the way they did.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And it's not just theory,
Right.
right? Lazar recounts this, like, incredible experience with something he called the sphere.
Okay.
And it was this object totally separate from the craft themselves that was, like, generating a gravitational field so strong that he couldn't even touch it.
Wow.
He said it was like hitting an invisible wall.
Imagine that for a second. A physicist, trained to understand the laws of the universe, encounters a force so beyond his comprehension
Yeah.
that it challenges, like, his whole understanding of reality.
Right.
So it's no wonder that experience stayed with him and became such a cornerstone of his story.
Okay, so we've got this top secret facility, a physicist who's like, encountered these forces we can barely wrap our heads around.
Right.
And then he walks into this hangar.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting.
This is not your typical aircraft hangar, filled with tools and spare parts. Instead, Lazar describes these 9 disc-shaped objects. Each one, he says, it was crafted from a single seamless piece of metal.
Wow.
And, keep in mind, this is the 1980s,
Right.
a time when, like, even the idea of 3D printing was in its infancy.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to imagine, right? Like the technology to make something like that it wasn't there.
Exactly. And the craftsmanship, it wasn't the only thing that really struck Lazar.
Okay.
He mentions these, like, really small seats inside the craft,
Yeah.
leading him to believe that whoever or whatever piloted these things were significantly smaller than humans.
You can't help but picture like those classic sci-fi images, these like small, maybe large-headed beings sitting in those tiny seats, piloting these things across the galaxy. It's wild.
It's wild, and it gets even wilder because Lazar then does something that would make anyone's head spin.
What's that?
He touches one of the craft.
Oh, wow.
And this is where his story goes from intriguing to almost, I don't know, mystical,
Yeah.
He describes the feeling as, like, unlike any material he'd ever encountered. Smooth, cool to the touch, And he says that it left this really profound impact on him,
Mm.
almost like it shifted his understanding of reality.
It's like this wasn't just seeing something unusual.
Right.
It was like this visceral, almost spiritual experience.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what kind of psychological impact would something like that have?
Yeah.
Especially on someone who's trained in, logic and science.
It's a question that really lingers.
Totally.
And that brings us to the question of how these things actually worked.
Okay.
And this is where Lazar's account gets even more extraordinary.
Okay.
Because he talks about a propulsion system based on something he called Element 115.
Element 115. Okay, now for our listeners who aren't like walking periodic tables, that might not mean a whole lot. But what's crazy is that element, it wasn't even officially discovered until years after Lazar first talked about it.
Right, exactly. It's now known as moscovium, but the fact that he was discussing it in the 1980s is at the very least a fascinating coincidence. Now, moscovium, even today, it's incredibly difficult to produce, and it decays rapidly.
Right.
But Lazar claimed that this element, in its stable form, was key to creating a reaction that could literally distort gravity.
So hold on. So if we're trying to follow along here,
Yeah.
these craft, they weren't flying in like the traditional sense. They were manipulating the very fabric of space-time, bending gravity to their will.
That's exactly how Lazar understood it, and whether it's true or not, the concept is mind-boggling.
Huge.
Think about it. Harnessing the force of gravity, a force that governs stars and galaxies. That's the level of technological advancement that we're talking about here. It challenges everything we think we know about physics.
Totally. And remember, this is just one part of Lazar's story.
Right.
There's a whole other side to this. Like the aftermath of his time at S4, which is just as gripping and maybe even more disturbing than, this whole idea of alien tech.
Yeah, imagine living with this knowledge.
I know, right?
The weight of this incredible secret, and then having your life turned upside down.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Lazar claims happened to him.
So he's living with this secret, right? This knowledge of alien tech. I mean, it's huge. But then, like you said, things get, well, kind of dark.
Yeah, it's like his life is turned upside down.
Yeah.
Lazar, he claims, intense surveillance, people following him, like his past just erased. He walked into this world, this hidden world where, powerful forces are at play, and they want to make sure he understands the rules.
That's chilling.
Yeah.
And then there are the phone calls, right? Like these mysterious voices threatening him, warning him to stay silent. It paints this picture of, a world where some truths are just too dangerous, too disruptive.
Right, and it makes you think, like, what price are we willing to pay for knowledge?
Yeah.
What happens when that knowledge, it challenges everything we thought we knew about, ourselves, our place in the universe. It's a lot.
It's a lot to process.
Mm-hmm.
So let's bring it back to our listener for a second. We've walked through Lazar's story, this incredible, extraordinary story. But what are we supposed to make of it all?
That's the heart of it, right? I mean, Bob Lazar's story, it forces you to confront, well, the vastness of what we don't know, whether you believe every detail or not. It's like holding up a mirror to us, to our civilization, and asking, what if? What if we aren't alone? What if there are, other beings, other intelligences out there that have achieved things that, well, we can only dream of?
It's a humbling thought.
It is, and it challenges us to think beyond our own limits, right? Imagine a future where humanity has cracked the code. Interstellar travel, the secrets of gravity, maybe even contact. It's a future filled with so much possibility.
That's almost too much to wrap your head around.
It is. It really is.
But as we kind of sign off on this deep dive, here's a final thought for everyone listening. If there were, let's say, advanced civilizations out there and they were watching us, watching our progress, what would they think? Would they see us as a species on the verge of something incredible? Or are we still just, I don't know, messing around in the cosmic sandbox, totally oblivious to our true potential? Until next time, keep looking up, keep asking those questions, and keep exploring. There's a whole universe of possibilities out there.